Some experts think Baylor football really nailed the transfer portal, but can we even say that at this point in the year? Let's discuss it on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor. I am your host, Cam Stewart. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. As I saw an interesting post about Big 12 teams in the transfer portal, and Baylor looked pretty good in that one. So I want to break that down, talk about realistically where they are at. Also, looking towards the future, past this year, there is a quarterback coming into town today as you're listening to this. And I'm more intrigued. I want to talk about his prospectus a little bit, but also how Baylor will recruit quarterbacks in the future. I think that's a big discussion. And we already kind of knew this, but men's basketball making some things official, and it could make them officially a contender. We'll talk about that as well. But starting with the transfer portal rankings for Baylor football. Now, Rivals put this out on Twitter, or the app formerly known as Twitter, yesterday, saying, how did each Big 12 program do in the spring transfer portal window? And they have, really some good grades. Only 2 Ds. Ds as worse as the worst that they handed out. Only Houston and Arizona State got that. But Baylor, on the higher end of things, with a B+ grade. Arizona got an A, Kansas State got an A, UCF and Utah got A's. And then the B+ range is Baylor and Kansas. And one of those teams I think is going to compete for the Big 12 championship this year. The other is Baylor. Colorado got a B. That's been like supposedly like the A+ team in the transfer portal the last couple of years. Oklahoma State, B-. That was one that they struggled a bit on the recruiting trail and in the portal last year, all told, but got to the Big 12 championship game. And then some C+ out there to BYU and Cincinnati, and a solid C to the TCU Horned Frogs. And I kind of want to take a look at Baylor just as the whole in the transfer portal window. But I'm not surprised to see Baylor this high, because initially when I read it, I thought, B+ for the transfer portal? That seems a bit high for me. But when it's looking at the spring window, okay, I can see that. And like we've talked about on this podcast before, like the best teams in any conference or in the country are not, putting their team together through spring transfer portal. It can plug some holes and can put some starters on the field for teams like Baylor, but it's not necessarily where you see some of the great roster construction. But when you look at the spring window for Baylor, it has been very productive. You got guys in Colton Thomason and Sidney Fugar on the offensive line. Of course, Thomason I see as someone for a later date, maybe not so much this year. But I talked about the guys you got on the defensive side of the ball who could really plug in and play as starters. I'm talking about Snacks Johnson coming back from Arkansas, Jaquez Evans, the edge guy from Western Kentucky, who is coming off an injury but had some real productive years out there and was a terrific player for the Hilltoppers. Linus Noel as well, the defensive tackle who came in from Texas Southern. That's a guy you could see plugging in and playing. I know it's a different level of football, but the need for nose tackles is quite big for Baylor. And that's your look at the spring transfer portal window. So you count them to 5 guys, and I think 4 of them, really 3 at least, could be in your starting lineup for this year. So B+, okay, sure. I'm willing to hear that out and give them that grade, B+. When you look at the transfer portal as a whole for the Bears this year, I don't know if I can put it that high. When you look at the spring transfer portal guys, the fact that you brought in 3 starters, I think garners a grade for that. But in terms of a grade for this whole portal offseason, I think it's far too early to tell. Because with Baylor and really so many schools, everyone but the elite programs in college football, you can't grade a transfer portal until you actually see some games. Now in basketball, that's different, which we'll actually talk about later in the show. But like Baylor basketball got two of the best guys in the portal, so that grades out to an A plus. But for football, it's just such a stark difference in terms of experience of guys who are going into the portal, and I don't know that you can make an honest grade on it yet. I will say this: you have 15 guys go out the door and you brought in 15. So already that's a great look, right? That's very even. But you lost probably two of your best players on the offensive side in quarterback Blake Shapen and certainly tight end Drake Dabney. They go to Mississippi State, TCU respectively. I will say also about these outgoings, a lot of them don't have a landing spot yet. A surprising amount. I think it's 5 of them. Bryce Simpson, who was a guy who didn't play a lot in the interior offensive line. Same with Hakeem Vance and Troy and Yanwu on the defensive side. They were guys who did not play a lot. They entered the portal right after the spring game, have not found a spot yet. Jordan Neighbors has not found a spot yet. Alfonso Allen has not found a spot yet. That's a guy who entered right after the end of the season, and I thought was going to be a cornerstone piece for the Bears in the future. Has not landed anywhere. So I guess, nothing against those guys individually, but that is probably a something of a good sign for Baylor, that it's guys who weren't really factoring into your plans anyway. Oh, I forgot Rod Dilworth also coming into the portal in this spring cycle for the Bears. That's a decent pickup as well. But if you look at it in toto, you got probably your starting quarterback in Daquan Finn. You've got your best defensive player's brother, Cameron Jenkins, who I think can play a role in this team. Ashton Hawkins, who I was very high on out of Texas State, coming in at the receiver position. Kendrick Simpkins at safety, a guy I like a lot. You bolstered your offensive line. You had to. Jamal Bell, a guy that Matt Mosley loves. And then some of the guys that come in the spring. I think it's a good haul. Don't get me wrong, but I think that would, to give a grade as high as a B plus for the total of the transfer portal, it would need to be relative to where they were last year and their transfer portals of years gone by, because they've obviously really struggled in that department. I think you got some starters out of this, but if you go from 3-9 to 4-8, I don't know that it's going to make much of a difference. And it's been very unproven. This group and this coaching staff is really unproven in terms of who they brought in. I look at some of the Barrington brothers and Jackson Player and just guys who didn't necessarily live up to the hype that they got coming out of the portal. They'll need to hit on a couple for me to think really confidently about those grades. I like that they brought guys in positions of need, but we don't necessarily know how they're looking yet. I mean, we just don't. And a lot of these guys from the spring, obviously the guys from the spring did not practice in spring ball with these guys. So yeah, you filled some positions of need, but I don't know how to grade it overall. B plus in terms of just those things, those positions of need. I guess that's just fine. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by the number one investing expert, and that is, of course, our friends at Yahoo Finance. It has been the brand behind every great investor for more than 25 years. So whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for some extra guidance like me, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the number one finance destination. What they do is they give you a holistic look at everything, okay? The news cycle, editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, charts that customize to what you are looking for, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, which includes your 401k and any other investments that you've got going. It's a comprehensive perspective, and it's what sets it apart from other, Bush League investors. And it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. And with a community of over 90 million users each month, Their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. So for the comprehensive financial news and all the analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. Once again, that is yahoofinance.com, your number one financial destination. Looking more towards the future of football, not just who's going to play for this team in this fall, but more towards, some years down the line. We got a great report from Will Turboff, friend of the show, friend of all of us who, follow the news cycle for recruiting. Will Turboff from 247 Sports, Bears Illustrated, covering Baylor specifically, announced on Twitter that Edward Griffin, quarterback from Coppell High School here in Texas, is taking an unofficial visit to Baylor today, Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. We've heard his name come up from Turboff before. Baylor, I think, once again, is playing a little bit of catch up for the class in terms of quarterbacks, and with Adam Schobel having decommitted and gone to Oklahoma State. He's now a Cowboy, and now they look towards a Coppell Cowboy. Edward Griffin is the one coming in to pay the Bears a visit. Now, Coppell had a damn good year this year. For the first time in a while, they really took it up a level, and their quarterback, of course, was a big reason why. Passed for over 3,100 yards on the year, 41 touchdowns to just 3 picks on the season, playing a high level of high school football up there outside of the Metroplex, and 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground. Now, to give you the information that you guys are going to hound about and freak out about, Baylor is his best offer. They offered him a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. They gave him the offer. His other ones that he holds are from Marshall, North Texas, UTEP, and UTSA. He is one that doesn't have a ranking on 247, but is ranked as a 3-star in some other outlets. And certainly his stock rose very much this year as he goes into his senior year, standing over 6 feet tall and filling out that body, listed at 185. But if you see some of the pictures, there's some good muscle on him for a high school kid. And the highlights are promising, mainly because they are highlights. And we all love a quarterback named Griffin down here at Baylor. I would love to get Edward on the show. Would love to hear him talk about what he'll hear from the Bears and from Jake Spavital and what this offense is going to look like, because we really haven't heard from high school recruits on the offensive side of the ball and what they are excited about and what the coaches are telling them, and just in terms of the system that they're going to run. So would love to get him on the show for that, and we'll work towards that. But really what I'm interested here for Edward Griffin, whether it be Edward Griffin or anyone else that Baylor looks at in this cycle, is how Baylor is going to approach recruiting that position, recruiting quarterbacks, because it has been pretty public and pretty well known their struggles recruiting that position here in the last couple of years. And in fact, before RJ Martinez left in the transfer portal, you had 3 guys, the top 3 guys on the depth chart were all transfers. DeQuan Finn, Sawyer Robertson, 1, 2, whichever way you put them. And then you got to go down to third string to a guy like Nate Bennett to get a guy that they've actually recruited. And, they've needed that at depth position, or for depth at the position, the last few years as well. And even back to Matt Rule, they have needed grad transfers to come in to fill out some depth on the depth chart at quarterback. And I'm just wondering, how much longer does Baylor go the traditional route of recruiting quarterbacks out of high school? Because you're seeing it at all levels in college football now, in FBS, I should say, whether it's the big boys or all the way down to some of the bad teams in the Power Four. They're hitching their wagons to transfers. And personally, I don't think that's a bad idea. I excuse me, I really don't. I think that's a good way. I mean, you look at the college football playoff last year, and 3 of the 4 quarterbacks were transfers. J.J. McCarthy is a transfer, and so was Michael Penix, both from Indiana. And, of course, Quinn Ewers at going from Ohio State to Texas. The 2 teams in the Big 12 championship last year both had transfer quarterbacks, with Ewers and What's his name? Oh my God, I just totally blanked on his name. Oklahoma State. Alan Bowman, who took a visit to Baylor last year, as a matter of fact. They're all the teams at the top are transfer quarterback teams, and you're going to see it at Ohio State with a Will Howard. You seen it at Notre Dame last year with Sam Hartman, and again this year with the kid from Duke. I mean, it's just this is the way the top end of college football is going, and I just wonder how far that goes down, because at some point, there's got to be a cradle of quarterbacks, right? I don't know whether it goes down to Baylor or if you have to go down to UNT or a Rice to get, a place where you can actually get quarterbacks to commit out of high school and be there for 2 or 3 years and develop in your system before going to a bigger and better place. I don't know. I'm interested to see if some of these smaller schools are continue to develop quarterbacks. I know, whereas Baylor's had transfers, in this year and had, backup transfers before that. TCU is still rolling with guys that they've developed. Tech is rolling with guys that they have developed, and those are the teams that I look at and see. Well, whichever way they're going, in terms of their resources and their recruiting base, that could be the way that Baylor goes as well. But it's no secret. And, you looked at the traditional powers in the conference last year, Texas and OU both had transfer portal quarterbacks, and OU's going to do it again. Oregon is where they all go now. Like is it going to become a time, or is there going to be a time in the very near future where Baylor's like, we're not doing this anymore? We're not. Maybe we'll have some clipboard guys, for some depth guys, but we know that this is the most important position on the football field, and we need to have a guy with experience to be there and to do that. And so I am fascinated to see, now that, a 4-star guy in Adam Schobel decommits and commits to a conference rival, if that timing is coincidental or not, to see whether Baylor will continue to heavily recruit quarterbacks in high school and use their resources to do that. Because I think that position, more than anyone else on the football field, I think you're going to start to see even more and more transfers. I mean, again, I've already listed it off. It's already happening. It is already happening. In the last 2 Heisman Trophy winners, transfer portal quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams. Like that is the way, obviously, college football as a whole is going. And therefore, that is the way the quarterback position is going, in my opinion. Maybe we'll ask our pal about that too if he comes on the podcast. I think that would be an interesting discussion to have with a guy who's actually being recruited as a quarterback right now. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, okay? Because it is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, $150. Bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. I'll tell you, my Boston Celtics are getting me some money. I love that. It's so easy to use. If I'm winning money off it, it really is very easy to use. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Some big news yesterday from John Rothstein on Twitter. Something we kind of already knew, but it got me thinking a little bit. Norchad Omier and Jeremy Roach officially pulling their names out of the NBA draft. They are sticking with us at Baylor. And Rothstein concluded the tweet by saying this makes Baylor Final Four contenders. But are they? It's something I've been thinking about all day, like genuinely. Because if you look at their top end talent, yes, they are Final Four contenders. But if you look at the roster, because a roster and a team ain't just made up of top end talent, they've got some holes here that they've got to fix. And again, you look at the center position. I know I've harped on it a lot, but you just don't have a lot of depth there. And something that Baylor has been really good at, even when they've had some top end centers like Yves Misi last year, is platooning that position. I think mainly for defensive purposes. They've platooned that position a lot. They don't have a lot of centers like they used to with Money Mott, Jonathan Motley, playing 35, 36 minutes a game. It's not happening. They do a lot of running, a lot more running than some other centers or some other teams do to their centers. So do they have the top end talent to be a Big 12 and therefore a national contender? Yes, they do. Do they have the roster? I don't know that they do yet, which stinks because I really do believe in this team and this coach, and I love how it's coming together. But I just think there's one or two more, probably just one more spot needed to fill to have me really thinking, okay, top 5 and Final 4 or bust. They're almost there, but I don't think they're quite there yet. But like Steve Henson said at the end of last week, they're not done yet. They have not closed up the shop. And there are some talented guys out there in the transfer portal. Ugana Onyenso, who had a game in the SEC where he blocked 10 shots in a game. I think that kid's terrific. But there are some centers out there. The cupboard is bare, sure, but it's not empty. It's not. And this coaching staff and this head coach specifically has one of the best eyes for talent in all of college basketball. So do I think they have the talent to get there at the top? Yes. I think if you, and the intangibles too, by the way, the things like Jeremy Roach and Norchad Omier both playing in Final Fours. I think that stuff is important. I really do. And that's something they didn't have last year. That was something that I think worked to their disadvantage, was they just did not have a lot of tournament experience. And you bring in some high-end freshmen that obviously won't have that experience either, but you get 2 dynamite players out of the portal who do have that experience, who have made those runs, who do know what it takes to get there. And I love that. Some other news that broke last night, the Baylor Bears, the Baylor baseball Bears, have made a change. They have fired the pitching coach, James Leverton. He is out after 2 seasons, both seasons under Mitch Thompson, obviously, after they parted ways with John Strauss before that. And this is not a terribly surprising move. Usually with college baseball, I would think that Mitch Thompson has another guy in mind, but the pitching staff really took it on the chin this year for the Bears. And when that season started, the spiral, a lot of it had to do with the pitching. They had the worst ERA in the entire conference, comfortably, actually, at 6.51. Tech was actually second worst. They didn't have good pitching numbers either. Really, they didn't. But most of the stats, they are in the bottom third. They are the most earned runs allowed. They had the 3rd most walks. They gave up the 2nd most hits. They didn't do well in extra base hits either, although they were in the middle of the pack for home runs allowed. They had the 2nd worst batting average against at 284, which is pretty darn high. To put that into perspective, 227 was the best in the conference, which was UCF. So yeah, it was not a banner year at all for the pitching staff. I'm not surprised to see them make a move at that position, but I'll say it before. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do believe in Mitch Thompson and what he's building here. But I also said this, I think, early this week or last week. Next year is a bit of a prove it year. Again, not Omaha or bust, but this team had a real chance to make the Big 12 tournament and did not this past year. I mean, I know the back half of their schedule was not easy, but they were in 5th place a couple weeks ago, and they were eliminated from the Big 12 tournament contention a week before that tournament started with a whole weekend series left. So wasn't a great look, and pitching was obviously a big part of that. And to build off of that too, I mean, you had some good performers in there. You know, Marriott obviously Mason Marriott had a great start to the season. Ethan Calder was an all Big 12 guy. I liked what you got out of Kobe Andrade most of the year. But overall, that as a staff, as a rotation, needs to get better, because I know they were really high on the arms that they had coming into this season. And to say that it did not pan out would be an understatement. So let me know what you think about where they need to go next year for it to feel like an improvement, and how you feel about the Baylor football transfer portal overall, and where you think they'll go in terms of quarterback. I think it's going to be a lot more transfer heavy. Drop that down in the comments below, or just to say hi. I had some great messages in the comments yesterday's show congratulating me on being an uncle. Thank you guys for that. I really appreciate that. I love being an uncle, man. This is now an uncle a third time over, but I have half siblings and step siblings, so this is like a different side of the family that gets indoctrinated to being grandparents and uncles and aunts. So very, very excited about that. Be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell. We're dropping episodes every weekday, both on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Thank you again for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow with some more Locked On Baylor.